No, we went for a situation. Not a situation, a meeting. There's Cindy.
Sit down there, so
Have a good week, did you?
All right.
Last week, whatever. Had a good last week.
All right, we'll call the council meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. We'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you.
I think Jeff has the invocation.
Invocation? Oh, yeah. Did that, okay?
Absolutely.
All right. You would all stand? Let's pray. Father, we pause at this time to thank you for this day. Thank you for this board, the ability to serve this community. I look at the emergency personnel that's with us. I think of them. I think of other people that serve this city. We just thank you for them. Ask for your protection. As we look at tonight's budget, I ask for sharp minds and humble hearts. In Christ's name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. And welcome to all who are here. Appreciate your participation. Let's let the minutes reflect there are 6 council members present. I see none online, so Councilman Clondaris is absent. As usual, the quorum is established and requires 4 votes for any action tonight, although I don't believe we'll be taking any votes tonight other than the minutes. So let's start with that. The August 2nd minutes presented by Lynn, and for your review, any comments, questions, corrections, or is there a motion to approve, Ms.?
Move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, thank you. All right. Lynn, any comments on the Comcast cable fee or the July fund report?
Neither. The Comcast franchise fees are up about $1,000 from this time last year, so I guess that's good. And nothing to report on in the fund report unless you guys have a question you want me to try to answer.
I assume that the first tranche of property taxes is reflected in this.
Yes, and also is our first tranche of ARP funds on the 176 for the $1.7 million disbursement we got.
Yes, duly noted. All right. Any questions? All right. Well, with no unfinished business, essentially tonight our work is to listen to budget presentations by our airport manager, human resources, building and plan, community and economic development, and fire, and we'll go in that order. I did want to make just a few comments. Some of the things we're facing this year with property taxes, obviously wages are a big issue, and we're certainly trying to accommodate the increase in wages that have occurred because of the demand for workforce, and not just here in the city, but everywhere. So obviously that's going to be a pressure point on our budget. We have enjoyed a little bit of about a $37 million increase in our assessed value. That doesn't get us any more levy, but what it does is it does potentially impact the tax rate about 3 cents. So because of the broader assessed value, our taxpayers will pay approximately 3 cents less because of the increased AV. Now, countering that, unfortunately, is the levy increase that the state allows us. It's about, I think, Lynn, a 4.2% increase And looking at that with our new assessed value, that increases the rate about 7 cents. And again, that's just the growth, levy growth from last year that we're allowed and permitted, about 7 cents, and about 3 cents of that will be offset by expanded AV. We've had, in 2020, we had about 151 million of increased AV. Last year it was about 44. This year it's about 37 million, and that's still a pretty good number. So as we broaden the AV, we reduce that rate, and that's one of the good things about our growth. But obviously we have to protect our community and the expanded area that we've got, and that increase in assessed value requires that we're more diligent in our services and just having to try and offset that with revenue, and revenue is obviously still an issue. So given that, we do have some good news tonight about our health insurance. Made aware this week that and we'd planned for about a 12% increase in the health insurance, and looks like our rate is actually going to be decreased next year. So we've had a good claims experience year, and that's a big deal. It's the first time I can remember that our health insurance premiums will be going down. So that's good news. Just found that out last week. So with that backdrop, we'll start with Nick. You're going to present, got a couple budgets from the airport. If you want to draw us to the budgets that our council members can follow along in their budget books, we'll get started.
If you guys want to go ahead, we'll start with 206. That's my airport general fund. And if you guys are ready, just note a couple things. The first thing that I will note is in the
Nick,
personnel.
can you check and see if your mic's turned on?
It is turned on, yep. Do you want me to, I don't think it's coming through the speakers, but
I don't
it
think it
is
is
on.
either.
Test.
No.
No, and that's on. I don't know why.
Okay, would you please speak loudly?
I will speak louder. All right, so in personnel services, that you probably are questioning my large increase there, and the mix there is to cover the cost of that new roof next year. And other than that, our rentals, uniform and equipment, what we have been getting, the costs have just gone up, and so there is a slight increase from $5,000 to $10,000 there. So outside of that, there aren't any other changes. Capital outlays, I am happy to report we had our first meeting for the AEP power line project on Friday, and we are starting that project. We received a $7.2 million grant from the FAA, and we also received a $380,000 grant to cover 95% of that project. So a just shy of $8 million project will cost the taxpayers a grand total of $80,000. The other money that we are using to fund that is actually my 476 budget I'll talk about in a minute, but that is money that we made through fuel sales, so the airport is basically funding all but about $80,000 of that project. So that's out of our capital outlays, and that's what that small increase is for, is just to cover the $80,000 part of that. And then machinery and equipment is just a slight 3% increase. So this would be next year an overall of a 20.81% increase for the year, and then I do see that coming back down then once we get some of these capital projects completed. So if you don't have any questions specifically about that budget, I just kind of told you 476 is it's called a depreciation fund.
Let's hang on for just a sec, Nick.
Oh, sorry.
Do you all, have you had the opportunity to look at that budget? Do you have any questions specifically about that power line project or any of the other increases before we move ahead? Okay. All right. I'm not, this isn't playing overhead either, and I just turned that on and off. I don't think it's going to work.
So if you don't have questions about 206, 476, like I said, so every dollar that the business at the airport, so the airport owns the fixed base operator, which is the company that sells all of our fuel. 95% of those dollars go back into my general fund, my 206. 5% of those funds go into 476, and we are using the funds that we have amassed to date, plus what we're using this year to cover the remainder of the city's share of that power line cost. So we will be bringing 476 to cover that power line project. So.
Yeah, if you look on your fund report, you see it has like a $310,000 balance, so.
Yep. And I think we're currently at 306,000, something like that. With the fuel sales we are anticipating between now and the end of the year, and that will cover that gap.
Questions? So Nick, when will those funds be due next year?
For the FAA,
Yep.
we are in contract negotiations right now. AEP is supposed to have a contract to me by the end of this week for my engineer and I to sit down and fill out, it's a standard contract. The city engineer will go through that, and we are guessing this will be an 18 to 24-month project to lower the power lines. If we were able to, we're at about 40% design completion on the project right now. So we have to get the contract in place and then finish the design and then order all of the materials. If we were able to order everything today, it would be a minimum of 11 to 12 months just to get the materials on site. So they're expecting a 3 to 6 month construction time. They will probably do some of the foundation and the site prep work starting next year, but I don't think that we will actually see towers moving until the spring of 23 is my guess. So I'm guessing spring to fall. The other side of that is they have to look at what the Department of Energy will let them do as far as shutting those power lines down, because they are part of the national power grid. So they will have to coordinate with other agencies to make sure that they can turn off those two lines together, because it's a total of right around 7 million volts on those power lines. And so that'd be a pretty big hit if they didn't cut that out.
So again, your best guess as far as I understand that the project is certainly in flux, but as far as when those funds need to be.
And it'll be a drawdown. So we will have our money ready up front, and then with the FAA dollars, it will be a drawdown. When we order the material, we'll be paying X amount. When we get, when the foundation work is started, we'll pay X amount. When they actually go out to raise the towers, we will pay X amount. And that'll be part of that contract, is a very detailed schedule as to what is due, when it is due, and how much is due at what points throughout the project. So,
That was my question, was just if our match had to come right up front off the top, or if it was with each section.
so every drawdown,
Yeah.
the FAA will pay 90%, the state will pay 5%, and we will pay 5%.
Okay.
So we're hoping to have the majority of our portion done next year with all of the materials. That's going to be the expensive part, is ordering all of the materials. The actual construction part of the project is not going to be that expensive, I don't think. So we might have some rollover, I don't use these funds next year, but that will be out of my 476 budget that we go back through now.
So you're, again, I'm going to go back to your airport budget, 206.
Yep.
You're showing 180,000 for capital improvements
Yes.
out of 444. What you're saying is 80,000 of that will go towards the match,
Correct.
and the remainder will come out of the other.
Correct.
So the additional 100 is for,
Pavement maintenance.
right. But I'm curious what, when you worked with Baker Tilly on the capital improvement plan, and I'm trying to find that. You had put down 300,000 for 2022 on capital improvement plans and 650,000 in 2023. And I'm just curious, what that's about, and because I don't see that in here.
I will need to get with,
Hang on, I think I just found it.
the main reason that our part of the CIP changed was because we did receive the supplemental funds for the power line project. Originally, we thought the power line project was going to be a couple years from now, but in 2019, we received that supplemental grant. We were one of 2 general aviation airports in the United States to receive those funds, and without them, we would not be able to do the power line project right now. We'd still be a couple of years.
Right, but what the CIP shows is in 2022, you need 300,000 for the 927. It looks like that would be, is that engineering costs? Because then you're showing, in fact,
I don't think I have.
that might be road relocation. It says
Yeah,
runway 927, program definition, road relocation,
yep,
shows 300,000, and then in 2023, you're showing 650,000, phase 1 for design.
correct. And that is all been pushed back 1 year.
Okay. All right, we have to, the reason I'm asking is we're working on this final comprehensive plan. This is what guides the city to know what we can afford and what we can't afford. And it's taken all the departments, their needs, their wishes, their capital projects, and trying to align them so that we know on an annual basis what we're facing. And not just our property tax, but all other revenues, be it grants, be it loans, be it bonds, whatever it is. We need to know what these capital improvements are. And that's why we met last week. Jack, you were involved in that 2 weeks ago with Baker Tilly and Jeremy and Lynn, and we're trying to finalize the capital improvement plan that you all received and used last year as we got narrowed down into the budget world. And that needs to be updated on this if you get a hold of Jeff and let him know that.
I thought I had talked to John about that. I sent him our updated one.
Okay, well, it's showing in the draft, and I just want to make sure that, so. But again, what we really watch with this document are the reserves. And, departments can spend money from tax revenues, from lit revenues, from edit revenues. I mean, there's a lot of different funds. But they can also, if they're overspending, it's taking it out of their reserves. And I know in your case, you've planned your reserves knowing that this project was coming up. And some departments utilize, for example, the MVH funds. If they've got a big project in a certain neighborhood, they'll save money up and they'll have huge reserves, and then they'll spend down large amounts. So the capital spending is what really drives this up and down. But bottom line is there's still a reserve requirement that you all have established for these budgets. And we can't spend money we don't have. And we have to watch, our best predictor is this comprehensive financial plan. And that is being finalized now, and we'll add that information to it. And then you all get a copy of that, and it'll show these departments not only what they're spending, what they want to spend, but what they can afford based on what their reserves are. And that's really been a huge issue, a huge part of why we use this comprehensive financial plan as a tool during budgeting. So, good. I appreciate that. And just make sure that that information gets there. So again, this document is accurate as we can be. So, other questions? All right, Nick. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, Jennifer. Do you want to stay? See you, Nick.
He stayed for his. It's only fair. It's only fair, right?
All right, Jennifer, you've got just one budget, correct?
Just one.
Yeah, all right.
I have one, and it's gonna, Liz, I have 3 minutes, so, mine is pretty straightforward, the biggest, reduction.
And you are number 3.
9103.
All right, y'all ready? All right.
Okay. There's a reduction in my overall budget of about $29,000, and the majority of that, or I should say, all but about $300, comes out of my personal services. So as it's, the dynamics right now in the offices that Whitney is under my budget, however, we share her with the mayor's office. But this past year, we have found that the majority of her responsibilities and her work really is board tax meetings, council, budget prep. She's doing more of the mayor's type work than she is HR. So she is coming out of my budget and being placed into the mayor's and she'll have that responsibility of that employee. So because of that, wages, FICA, Medicare, perks, insurance, everything that goes with her is taken out of my budget and put into another one. Does anybody have any questions about that? No? Okay. Supplies, no increase, no change there. Just switching some money around from operating to maintenance. And then other personal or other services and charges. Because of the IT appropriations, I did move about $4,700 out of my budget into the IT appropriation. And there would be an increase to other services and charges. That's for an employee recognition program that I'm wanting to develop and kick off for 2022. Does anybody have any questions?
I do have one, Jennifer. I guess just a little concerned maybe that you won't have anyone to help you with some of the projects?
So Fred, actually, his maintenance falls under in my budget, full-time janitor. He actually has put me on notice that he will be retiring. So when I replace Fred, I'm actually wanting to replace the part-time employee. So then I would have the rest of his full-time wage to hire a part-time employee, kind of for that transition. That's my intent.
I have that concern too, and I've discussed that with Jennifer.
Yeah, I just worry because, I mean, we're not getting any smaller
Right.
as far as number of employees.
I think
You know.
where you're really benefit and where it helps you is when you have a big project and you can hire somebody part-time and put them on a project.
Yes. My part-timer coming in is going to be very specific, very, I need help with certain things. I do. And I will be hiring somebody in to be dedicated for those larger projects, help me with the wellness. I get an awful lot of support and resources from the trust. I truly do. So I rely on them an awful lot. And it helps, that helps them. And I do rely on Karen still with the fire department. Karen used to be up in our office too, but she transitioned out, so I say keep it in.
Others, questions? Okay. All right, Jennifer, thank you. Justin, let's move on to building and plan.
It's number 9 in the tabs.
Everybody there?
Yes.
All right. So before you have the proposed building and planning budget for next year, there's a standard increase of 3.5 to wages and salaries. However, you'll notice there's a net decrease of 1% to the wages, and that's due to the transfer of the former planning director to the community and economic development department. So that gave us the net decrease there, the wages. Personnel services is up by 3%, and that's in part due to the contributions to PERF and FICA. So those are, again, were standard. There's no change to the operating budget, so the supplies all stay the same as last year. Capital outlays, we increased that by 17%, and that's mainly to help fund the beautification projects downtown. So we've been working to kind of transition and add biodiversity to our street trees downtown. So removing some of those overgrown trees is the priority, and we just wanted a little bit more funds to help do that. Let's see. So the total operating budget for the building and planning department has a net increase of 3% for next year. So with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Justin, where do you show your decrease, and maybe I overlooked it, for communications that's being transferred over to the council budget?
I know there was a communications budget. We did leave some in there for, we're going to need to purchase a new copier next year. So I think with that wouldn't come out of the IT budget.
That'd be capital out.
That'd be in 400s. That'd be in capital outlays. I would just ask that maybe we can sit down and look at that and see where there was money. There should, all these budgets should show a reduction in that communication lines because Metronet was put in the council budget, as well as a lot of the licensing and maintenance for a lot of the IT that we use in the city. So
Yeah, we could definitely, if we could transfer that down to the copier, that would be what that would be for.
Yeah, I'd ask that you and I sit down and look at that and find where that is, because it's shown on most of the other budgets, and I don't see it here. Other questions? Okay. All right, Justin, thank you. So you remember when Jeremy was named Community and Economic Development Director, the majority of the budgets that he reviewed as planning director, he's now doing for Community and Economic Development, which I do believe he's up next. But Justin is now just not having to worry about all those budgets. That's part of Jeremy's job. And Jeremy, with that,
I have to make no well, unless you want to sit through my 700, I'll let you do it.
There's an answer.
all right.
If the mayor and the council doesn't object, you can switch with the Jeremy.
Sound like some horse trading going on there. That's fine. All right, Mike, so you're going to do township.
You may not like this because I've got 3 hours planned for you.
Jeremy, you have a chance to. So we'll go to 103 first.
You know, your budgets are being prepared for you tonight. There's nothing hid about it, but I will help next year. June 1st next year, I'll be retiring. This is a learning experience. You see there's a crowd in the room tonight. So you've got young officers sitting back here just watching how budgets are being presented, how things are discussed with you, coming from the fire territory. So your fire territory was organized in 2009. Council's been very strong behind it. Territory board's been very strong behind it, and we applaud that. And these guys are not only firefighters, technical rescue, confined space, things they do, high angle rescue, water rescue and dive. It's their budget, it's their funding, so I'm just presenting for you. So on the operating budget, if you want to jump into it, it is 103. And as we all know, those first 4 pages or 5 is the state fund, is the PDF funds, the forms that we use. If you want to go to the 2022 Fire Territory Operating, the next 140 sheets, we'll start going down through it. Our budget's prepared for the replacement of individual indicia. And if you've had time to look through all the forms that go with this, at the very back of it, you're going to see a form that shows you who's on what shift and what job descriptions they have and things that they do. So your wages and salaries, you've got a replacement for B shift, and it's got 3 new hires, 1 for each shift, A, B, and C. Where our guys work 24 hours, 1 48 hours. So hearing what Jennifer presented tonight, there's going to be a healthy decrease in the insurance that's a part of this budget. It does reflect 26% line. There are pages in the back part of this budget that explain the differences, and there's a couple of them we'll go over with you tonight. Now, clothing allowance, cell phone allowance, we did not increase. But you've got a big increase on medical that's in the proposed budget. There's also, you're gonna see the parentheses of 200,000 sitting there. That's coming from the mayor's office.
So let's stop for a minute. That does not belong in this budget, okay? Those are funds that we can potentially, you all can decide if you want to use those funds to fund a portion of these salaries as we're looking at a new program, a new mental health initiative. So it's not being spent out of this, it cannot be. This ARP money has to be spent directly from the ARP budget. But the discussion here is that we would, and I put it in the budget, if you look at 176, actually the budget right behind here, I've got 200,000 in payroll bonus, right, in the salaries and wages. And the thought was that, you know, we would potentially fund to initiate the CARES program, this acute mental health unit that would be involved, and part of those responsibilities would be involved in these additional 4 firefighters that are being proposed. So it's not separate. Those funds are, I assume those funds are all in that budget, but the revenues would be coming from a different source.
It's easier to show it in here as a negative, so you can see actually what that is.
But I want to be clear, it's not coming out of this budget, because it's not a part of this budget. It has to be spent by statute, by
Can't be,
by federal proclamation. It's got to come out of 176.
And as this CARES program, since the mayor opened that door, this presentation will be coming to the council by your EMS chief, Chris Vance, will appear in the near future as an explanation. Some of you have already seen the PowerPoints and the sheets on it.
Well, I think it bears mentioning that, you know, that's a big part of these 4 additional hires, is that, you know, we're going to try and create this program. We've spent, what, a year and a half, and Chris has done a great job, and we've got, I think, a pretty good, we're ready to go with it. And to that end, we want to be able to get this thing off the ground, and I felt the ARP money was a good way to fund that program, or the portion of that program, which will also include part of the responsibilities of those 4 new firefighters.
Moving right along to your second page, your office supplies, operating supplies, you can see there's a little bit of an increase. That's on fuel. We bumped fuel up just a little bit. Remember, everything except diesel fuel, we get contracted out. The police department contracts out with us, which is great, because that sets that price down the road. $3,000 increase there on repairs and maintenance, just cost of small tools repair and everything just keeps going up. We left your other supplies, smoke alarms, fire prevention is the same. So for that category, it's a 4% increase. Going on to the next page, your other services and charges, your professional services. We left the attorney and the financial consultant set at the price it was for 2021. You will see there's an $8,000 increase there, because not only with the background checks and things that go on with hiring firefighters, same thing with law enforcement. There's things that has got to be done for your pension program. It's a little costly. In that figure also is a replacement for myself, and we do have one that's in the drop. There's a firefighter also to be leaving during the next year. So that all includes background checks for all. You will notice there's a $5,000 deduction, because we did put in here where we're moving items to your budget. Thank you very much. That really helps. You'll also see there's a deduct in communications down to 14.5 out of 27,000. The question that came up with a couple of you is why that's still in there for moving everything. We need to remember that Station 3 is not on fiber, so everything out there is a contract with Comcast. So the Eventually, fiber will be going in that direction, and we'll be able to get rid of those speeds. Google board pack, that's a deduct. So you'll see, that's why that's so high at 28% deduction. Printing and advertising are about the same. We did take a little bit of a decrease on our liability for the clerk's office estimate. And go to the next page, you'll see there's no increases, so that category is gonna be about a -5%. And then looking at capital outlays for your machinery and equipment, there's no increases. So your budget, as proposed, is 23% increase. Unique that running the department is $520,000. All the rest of it's in personal services for those that not only are our employees, but those that we know also. If you want to go through, if you look at your next page, that's a cash flow assessment. Those are just for your reading. Those are all projected figures. We're still waiting on the true stuff to come through from Baker Tilly. The next page breaks down the items of the individuals that's going to be involved in payroll. Mine's got red letters on it, yours does not. So you're going to, I want to point out, there's some positions that have been put in here that we're not sure, but we're putting them in the budget, just the potential of what could happen with this CARES program. If we get into the CARES program and the positions and the options are not going to be needed, those will be line one deductions. The first one, if you come down below battalion chief, you see it says CARES coordinator. That is a position that if next year, if this goes 100 miles an hour and it needs a director on its own to be working that program across the board with all the entities that be involved, the stakeholders, there's a potential. So there's something there the council or the territory may want to put in that position. So that's an open. The CARES program actually has three stages to it. The first stage we're already going to walk into, and that's an EMS chief and the fire chief making those calls during the daytime. The second portion of that, if it moves to that point, is paying somebody back here in these back roads overtime, on-call status, nights and weekends, to be able to help offset those calls. We're not sure where the volume of calls are going to go. If we copy what's happened in Fishers, it's going to go, it's going to be huge. So we did put money in the budget just to offset that. Again, that might be something that goes away, so line one cut. I want to compliment the wage committee because what they have done for us and the salary ordinance will be coming to you. Your advanced EMTs, 27 of them is where we're at now. It's going to be given, I don't know if you call it a spiff or whatever you want to call it. Also the members of the dive team, and also the members of the those that are certified in dive and water rescue, and those that are certified in technical rescue. And I applaud the wage and salary committee for bringing that forward for 2022. And they did not know. And then it also shows that negative that's in red on my page for the ARP fund. So that breaks down all your positions from fire chief all the way down to co-op students, all for that form. That's something for you to look at. If you have questions over that down the road, I'll be more than happy to answer them. If you go to the very last page, or next to the last page, you're going to see a page that's got all the shifts on it. If you look at my book, that gives you A, B, and C shift. It shows you where we're putting the individuals so that, as the mayor's talked about, he has stopped to visit with the guys at the station. One of the things we have discussed is that there's 3 guys working out of the station 3 down south. That's a driver of the engine, the front seat officer, the guy in the back seat. Same thing here at Station 1 on Main Street, an officer in the front seat, a driver, and a guy in the back. Station 2 now, with the addition of these individuals that we're going to help offset not only the staffing in the station, but also the CARES program, you will now have a guy driving the engine out of that station. with an officer in the front, and a firefighter in the back, and the same situation with the ladder truck. So you eventually have gotten to the point where our whole goal with this cost, and it is a cost, is being able to try to get your department from an ISO rating of 2 to an ISO rating of a 1. So this is just another step in that direction. So we wanted to give you this sheet because it shows the assigned station locations and what those guys are doing. Also, you'll notice that we break down underneath each name the other items that I have mentioned that they are involved. So that is your operating budget that was presented to the territory.
So I want to point out, if you go back to the first page, under employee benefits, the pension, the city's contribution, the department's contribution to the pension is back in the budget. Remember last year, we were able to save $474,000 roughly by utilizing some excess funds that were in the pension fund. There was an opportunity to fund about half of that this year, and the pension board voted to not fund that. So the full amount is back in this budget, and that certainly is going to account for a significant amount of expense back in this budget. That's $500,000. All I would say is that, we have to look at the budget. We have to look at what the levy is. We have to look at what we can raise, and if we can't raise the money, we can't spend it. So, we're going to be looking at the whole thing globally. Once we get all the budgets in, get an idea where the general budget is, we're going to look at the fire territory budget. We're going to look at potentially utilizing some ARP funds to help offset, and those will drive our decision-making as far as what we can actually spend, what we can raise. If we can't raise it, we can't spend it. So.
Mayor, don't forget that their AV did go down for next year.
Yeah, it was a small amount, which doesn't affect the levy. It just affects it'll affect the rate a very small amount. I'm not as concerned about that. And their levy did go up 4.2%. But if you remember right, last year, we did not I did not put the fire territory at the levy because, again, they had $500,000 that were being spent out of another fund that we couldn't count on being spent this year, and I'm glad we didn't, because had we gone to the levy last year, now we would have been $474,000 over the levy. So keeping them about $400,000 under the levy last year was the smart thing to do. I don't know where we're going to be at this year. Again, there's a couple $100,000 in ARP that we can potentially use to fund the first year, but those monies aren't going to be, they're going to be 1 year. And I don't want to get a budget built up and then not plan for future spending on these increases in personnel. So we're going to have to look at where we want that levy to be. But more importantly, we've got to get everything together, see where our revenue sources are. Like we did last year, we had to have some hard cuts made. I think all departments are going to, I think we're all going to be, even the city side is going to be over the levy some, and we're going to have to come, we always have to come back with line 1 cuts, and fire territory is no exception to that. It just, again, if you can't raise the funds, you can't spend it. And it's as simple as that. We've committed to the wages, the concerns that are being felt nationwide. And, I know the wage committee is committed to that across the board, but we can't do it all at once. And certainly, we'll see how this shakes down. There is an advantage this year that the health insurance is 5%, actually 17% than what we budgeted for. And that's a good thing. And that could help that. But, again, if we're X amount over the budget, we've got to cut that amount. If we're X amount over the levy, we got to cut that amount to get to the levy. We can't fund a budget with money we can't raise. And that's the problem we've run into. That's why we're using the comprehensive financial plan to make sure we're planning these capital projects and all of these expenses on a department by department basis. But at the end of the day, it boils down to the city levy, and the fire territory has their own levy. And it's pretty basic. It's pretty straightforward to see where the budget is, where their levy is, where their other miscellaneous revenue is, and if they want more than what we've got, there's nothing we can do but cut that. So, but we're not there yet. You know, we always ask, I told Chief, give me everything you want. And we all know, you guys have been doing this long enough, you know, there's wish lists in here, there's wants in here, and then there's obviously needs. And as we get closer to the time where we need to reconcile our budget with the state, some of those wants and wishes may have to be put off. But they're in there now, so you can at least see what the desire is.
Right, and that's why we put in there the 3 phases of this CARES program. Us doing it, Chris and I doing it as much as we can. What the next step could be with the CARES coordinator. So there's things in the budget that's like the mayor said, we know in May, June, July, and August, what our potentials are going to be for the next year. But we don't know what our income's going to be until we get closer to the end. So again, this is a learning experience where you're going to go back road. It's just like check with it.
And Chief, the rest of the council doesn't have the advantage the wage committee had of seeing, if I remember correctly, you have 27 out of your total force that are advanced EMTs,
That's correct.
which is really impressive. You know, that you guys have worked and obtained that, and that you're working hard to keep it, because I know that's not just a one and done. And so we do appreciate having you guys step up and have those qualifications, since so many of your calls are, you know, medical initially. So we, you know, it does keep our city safer. And when we saw that number as a wage committee and looked at how we had in the past, you know, looked across the board, and as other employees obtained certifications and they were necessary to their job, then we provided a stipend that went along with those certifications. And so that's what he was referring to earlier. And since it will be a little while before you see the wage and salary, I just wanted to bring that up at this point, the impressive rate that they have there.
Yeah, they've really grown in emergency services for what they do here. Any other questions on operating? If there is none, I'd like to move on to your equipment replacement, which is in your book as 410.
Did you want to do your hazardous material fund first?
Well,
It's up to you. Just on the way
I
there.
have to find it.
It's 247.
What is it?
247.
All right,
think we have-
247. So when you get, are you at 247? Hazardous materials and operating fund, we only can spend out what we take in and billings. We had sit down with the mayor a couple times this year. We had some incidents where there's some major spills. We were able to bill out for that. Billing for that is just not what we say, but it's also following what the state fire marshal has established for us to be able to bill. And that budget is $3,800, $3,800. So we'll use that to buy some equipment and replacement of boilers. Any questions on that? Any know that where you want to go?
410.
All right, equipment replacement, 410. Again, the PDF file forms, if you want to skip to that, we do have an explanation sheet.
Any problems with that word?
And between 2021 and 2022, you're going to see that we dropped our professional services that we pay out of the account down to $35,000. We had repairs and maintenance last year, $750, because we were looking at starting an additional building project at Station 2. With long-term, where we're looking at citywide, we decided we're not going to do that. We, by choice, was able to use funds out of this year's budget to place the front doors on the equipment bay, the main entry doors at the back of the station, the man doors, and the east door. That's been done. Actually, Captain Ziering is sitting in the room at his station as far as the station captains. This $200,000 that we have budgeted is going to go towards some repairs on the inside of the equipment bay. We feel that we'll push off the potential of building on the east side, as we were talking about at the beginning, which is a 5-year plan, your capital plan. We had that in there, so that'll have to be adjusted. So there's only $200,000 in repairs and maintenance. If you look at capital outlays, down a little bit, only because we were involved, we put $100,000 into the communications plan that was an assistance into the county. As all of you have probably read, there's a new radio communications plan for emergency services. It's in excess of $3 million. It's being funded through some programs at the county level. The only thing that we're going to have to do, and if you remember, Chief Whitaker and I came to you a couple of years ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, with this plan or reference, we purchased new portable radios that worked on 2 frequency bands. What we spent then in our portion and the police department's portion was not wasted funds. Those radios are going to be able to be used as portable radios with the new system. Our individuals, Joel Schilling sitting in the room as a programmer, he will be able to program all those portables to be able to fit to the new program for police and fire. We will be spending funds this year and into next year to replace the mobile radios. This is an additional mobile radio that goes in all the apparatus, and that'll be going to the territory board next month. We did, because we're not sure where things are gonna go with this new plan, we did put $75,000 in 2022. Probably won't get spent, but it's in that plan. And then the other capital outlays, if you remember underneath you for Ricker, we started with the tornado siren program. Number 8 is planned to be put in this year. Number 9 will be put in next year. And your community should be pretty well covered by what the design engineer with J&K Communications has set up for your community with tornado sirens. So we should be at that end where we were wanting to be. So pretty healthy decrease in equipment replacement. That fund will be readjusted this year. I think it's 0.03 something, and then we'll go back to 0.033. It's something that you do in the spring and Lynn, and I will make sure we get that done.
That'll be for 2023, not 2023.
Yes, it'll be for 2023. Any questions on equipment replacement? No fire apparatus planned for next year.
So just on the fire, tornado sirens, if you remember right, we had a grid of 9 total sirens in the area serving city in our fire territory, and this is the 9th, and it seems like we've been chipping away at this, but I'm really proud of that. It's huge.
Chief,
From-
I was
from where we
part
were.
of the territory board when we set that up. Now, are we going to be covered with our new annexation?
Correct. So we did put one up in front of the Zimmer biomat.
Yes, and I can hear it now.
Yes, you can. The other ones we're looking at right now, the mayor and I, we've had a little bit of a discussion. There's only one that we've actually had to put NIPSCO meter on. All the rest of them have been set at wastewater's lift stations. So we're borrowing power from them to make sure the battery system that's in those tornado sirens stay charged, and there's power to them all the time. So I brought the maps back out today to get to him sometime this week to look so that we can try to figure out where number 8's going to go for this year, number 9. There's some area in the territory to the southeast that's not being covered, but we're going to sit down and take a look at that, and hopefully there might be some power at lift stations. But you're only paying meter charge for one so far. We've been very lucky at setting them at the lift stations so that there's power already there.
All right, questions? All right,
801 is the pension.
801 is the pension. The pension fund is pretty well established by, between the 1937 plan, the 53 plan, and now into the 77 plan. These are all state funded or local funded through our pension relief plan. It's something that we don't adjust. It's all usually done by what the plan itself by the law. There's your total budgets. I think it's like 272,000. That also includes the bond for the pension secretary. It also includes legal services of $3,000, and then the payments that go out to the individual. just so you can see who all's still on pension, we do put that state paperwork in there for you also. For retirees and for dependents.
That pension fund generates from the state, let's see. Showing about 250,000 a year. Lynn, is that correct? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's,
That's fire pension distribution
Basically,
that comes
it's
from the pension relief fund.
we
That's-
basically get out what we put in. or
Right.
Get back what we put out, something like that.
So it's kind of a wash fund. When there was tax reform, the state took over and they pay pension back to the city through this fund for them to pay out. And that's why this fund has stayed pretty flat, although for a while there was a rate being charged and we were investing the funds in there, but it's very, very limited what those funds can be spent on. And there's also a cap to what can be spent. And this year, we would not have been able to spend the full amount of that pension contribution for the city. So the pension board made the decision to just let it ride. And there's still probably about,
Be about 6.
yeah, I don't have the accurate number here, but
Yeah, real close to 600.
Well, there's $500,000 invested, so
Yeah, so you have an investment that's sitting on, it's still growing, maybe 0.5% at $500,000.
maybe at 0.5%.
it's showing a million in here under investment. So I think there's probably a little more than that. But the point is, those funds are there. They were designed to be utilized, and as the state took that over, now they're just kind of caught in those funds. And there's very, very significant restrictions on how those can be used. And we were able to use a good portion of that last year, so that helped last year. Yep.
Yeah, and at the end of July, there is $508,000 in there, so between that and the.
And the investment, there's about 1.5. Okay. All right, I do want you to get with me to go through this comprehensive financial plan and make sure that the capital improvements are accurate.
Correct.
Because that will do nothing but help when we sit down and try and dial your budget in. So I want to make sure that's right. So please do that with me yet this week.
I'll call up in the morning and get it.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Questions? All right.
Fire stations are always open, as you see, very interesting.
Yeah, thank you all for your support tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming. I know we mentioned the great work they do and the really heroic work that happened a few weeks ago. And we all understand how important these budgets are and staffing them. And I know you all take your responsibilities very serious to make sure that we fund what your needs are. So your support's appreciated. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Jeremy. You guys don't have to stay if you don't want,
He's long-winded.
unless you want to listen to Jeremy.
I'm going to start with 246.
I can start wherever you want.
That's the next one.
All right, let's wait a minute till they
Yeah.
clear out. 246, while we're waiting, would be the
Tech Park.
Tech Park.
We need to make our yearly call to your friend at the state revenue office, don't we?
Yeah. You usually remind me of that. The first reminder.
Our yearly nag.
So just as a reminder, these funds come from increment that we gather off the Tech Park, state income tax and sales tax that's generated within the park. What Jeremy and Lynn were just referring to is that the distributions are somewhat erratic. But nonetheless, they have funded the accelerator, and we're looking at potentially expanding accelerator capabilities in the community, but we do have to rely on on the revenues. I think last year, Jeremy, what did we get, about 300,000?
I got 20 corners on here, that's 338.
Yeah.
69. It's down at the bottom.
So this is funded entirely by those, that increment from those taxes generated.
At 5 million, so the technology park we started, created back in 2012, and we got our first revenue in 2013, I think it was $350, not on here, but, so $5 million per capita, so we can't bring in any more than 5 million. After the 5 million, it gets reset, and I believe you can collect up to 250,000 a year. That was some lobbying work that the technology park did a few years ago to try to lobby the state so there was some continuing funds within these parks, because the parks don't end after the $5 million ends. So far, we've been successful in securing $250,000 per year, but you have to earn that on top of the money you've already. So you get reset once you hit your 5 million mark, and then you collect up to $250,000 in additional growth after that. So far, we're still pushing. I'd like to see that increase to more like $500,000. $250,000 is great, but it doesn't go very far. And when you're talking about operating a innovation center, or an accelerator, or any kind of incubator, $250,000 is not going to go a long way in doing that. It would be nice if that number was closer to $500,000. I feel like if we can keep pushing the state legislator and talk to our legislators about increasing that over the next few years, that will help sustain all these incubators that are being created. There's only 23 or 21.
Yeah, and I don't know how many are active. Yeah. It was Mitch Daniels. Mitch Daniels set this up, and I think it ended under Pence. We were one of the last ones in. Governor Pence, I think, ended the program or did not continue the program as far as new tech parks. But just a quick note, the work that we've done with Nextremity will certainly benefit with more employees being out there. And again, hence the reason we're standing here with Jeremy's expertise and the work we've done for many years to develop and grow that tech park. It's not just our TIF district. There's this tax certified tech park increment that we're also generating off that. And having a new tenant is certainly a big win.
So these technology parks are recertified every 4 years. Last year, we got a 4-year recertification. We were recertified. Part of our recertification is you have a plan for what you're doing with these funds. The bulk of our funds have been spent on infrastructure within the technology park, creating that 140 acres of developable land. On top of that, the other major goal of our plan that was submitted for that recertification is this innovation center, incubator, kind of economic growth engine that we've yet to figure out where and what it is, but we're still working on that. And there's certainly some ideas that we have and some partners that we're discussing with. So the bulk of the money that's been budgeted, not only in 2021 and 2022, will go toward infrastructure and that innovation center and what that innovation center looks like over the next few years. Our goal for that recertification is 4 years from now, so in 2024, our goal would be to have this innovation center defined and hopefully either under construction or in the works or completed at that time, so that when we go to recertify again, we'll have accomplished that final goal in that recertification plan. So if you look at 2020 funds on hand, there's roughly 1.6 million available in 2021. We had roughly 50,000 in professional services. Our OrcaWorks contract, which is the Links agreement that we entered into, 67,000, and then we had 600,000 in capital outlays that can be used for that innovation center and/or any infrastructure needed within the technology park, which gave us a total budget of 717,000. Year end for this year would be around 930,000. Our expected revenue for 2022 is around 300,000. Which would give us a total funds on hand of 1.2 million for budgeting purposes for 2022. increase the professional services for the next year's budget of $150,000. We have the work contract with CLCL, instrument for $67,000, and then $100,000 for capital outlay, gives the total budget of $1,217,000. I'm not as concerned with the ending balance because I don't know that we will spend that $600,000, so that if we don't spend that $600,000 this year, it just stays in that budget, so there will be plenty of money available for next year, so I'm not overly concerned with that. And this obviously is a cap at $5 million, so we're only gonna get $5 million, so it's really important for us to spend money where it's gonna generate money. So far, we spent a lot of the infrastructure costs coming out of the Northern Tip District because it would generate income. The first few years of this budget were very minimal income, $35,000 for 3 years is what we brought in. Not enough to build a $1 million road. I will say, if you haven't seen that technology part of the report that was given to the state, we've invested roughly $5 million in our technology park, and we've seen $50 million in assessed valuation created off that $5 million, and that's just to date. I'm expecting that will grow to around $150 million. So the intent, the goal that we're trying to meet is we're putting money in the ground, but we're receiving at this point 10 times what we put in the ground, and hopefully we'll receive a lot higher than that.
Questions? All right, Lynn, what would you like to do next?
As far as budgets go, I don't care. Your general, redevelopment general?
Your call.
271.
Just tell us.
271. I think we're going in numerical sequence
We
here.
are.
So 271 is the only budget that I have that's actually rate dependent. So this is based on its own rate. The redevelopment general fund was created when the first TIF district was created back in the 1990s with the sole purpose of running that redevelopment department. So as we've grown, the cost to operate this is going to grow in the future. Right now, well, I've looked at trying to do over the next few years, and it may be a challenge, we'll have to figure it out, but ideally, I would see this redevelopment general fund be the operating budget for community economic development department. So the intent, we'll have to figure out how that happens. Right now, we have some funds in there that have accumulated over the years based on the tax rate. But obviously, as we look through here, we're spending down a lot of those funds that are on hand. Now, some of the funds from this year's budget may not get spent, so it won't be as dire as what it looks like on the end of 2022 budget. But if we're going to continue to pay for this community and economic development department out of the redevelopment general fund, with the intent of its initial creation, which was to fund the operation of the redevelopment commission, we'll have to make some changes in terms of how we do that. But for 2021, we had a current balance of $432,000, expected revenue of $57,000, which gave us a total of $490,000 for 2021. We had our general operating costs coming out of the redevelopment commission. Professional services was the highest of that, $300,000, and then the redevelopment general has kind of serviced as across the board redevelopment funds available. Without any boundaries. TIF districts have boundaries where you can spend the money in. Redevelopment general does not have any boundaries. It can be spent across the entire city. So we have $200,000 in infrastructure projects. Some of this funding is going for improvements that are tied to the senior apartment development on Center Street, because it's outside of anything. We have a total budget in 2021 of $231,000. And a year-end balance of roughly $258,000. Going into 2022, we have $258,000 plus the $57,000 in expected revenue, which gives us a total budget of $315,505 of total funds on hand. Wages and benefits for 2020. So a lot of this is new from 2021. For wages and benefits, total 72,000, that would be for wages, for my wages and for administrative assistant. Office supplies at 3,000, professional services stays the same at 30,000, $500 for any travel, printing, $2,500 for printing. The bonds are actually redevelopment member bonds. Every year we have to, each member of the redevelopment commission for the state statutes required a bond, so that money stays the same at $500. And then other services, $6,500 is for any services related to equipment that would be needed for. Right now, I'm using all of the equipment that's in the building planning department. As we determine where I land, whether I stay there again next year, we move my office to a new location. That $6,500 would be to help with any equipment purchase. I'm still leaving in $200,000 for infrastructure projects, which gives us a total budget of $315,000 for 2022.
So I'm sure you noted, from a salary standpoint, Jeremy and his administrative assistant, their salaries are being split up. His is being split up 4 ways. One is coming from redevelopment general, a quarter of it. There's also a quarter of it coming from the Northern TIF, a quarter coming from edit, and a quarter coming from sewage. The administrative assistant, I believe, it's a third coming from edit, a third coming from Northern TIF, and then a third from this budget as well. So you'll see the wages and salaries add up to about $119,000, but this budget will only reflect $35,490. The rest are coming, split up out of other budgets, which we're certainly allowed to do. And that's a way of, again, starting out, if you will. This is a first real year that Jeremy is on his own.
He's the ultimate.
But, you know, obviously the work that he's doing is creating a significant impact on our assessed value, which helps us grow, which generates more tax funds to do the things we need to do and have to do. So it's a critical position. Questions on his redevelopment general? And again, this is a tax-supported fund, the only one that he'll be presenting tonight that's tax-supported. Questions? All right. What would be next, Lynn?
470.
Okay, that would be the Northern Residential TIF.
So this is the one that we're doing, the Northern Residential TIF, the Southern Residential TIF that we created in 2019. When the state opened up opportunities to create residential TIF, obviously given all the projects that we have been working on and trying to address our housing growth needs, we were one of the first, if not the first, community to pass and create residential TIFs. We did 2 of them, a northern residential TIF and a southern residential TIF. Some of this is still a little bit of guesswork. We did get our first amount of revenue in right after I had done the budget, so I kind of went back and changed them. I had an original version and came back and changed them as seeing what we were originally getting in. The Northern TIF expected revenue for 2021 is around $80,000. We had budgeted for 2021 $10,000 in professional services and $10,000 in capital outlays, which had a $20,000 total budget for this year. Not knowing what revenue we were going to get in, I did my best guess of estimating a lot more. I wanted to make sure if we were getting any funds in, we would have those to do the project. So we're going to end up with what I think is going to be about $60,000 left over from this year that doesn't get spent, assuming we spend $20,000. There are a couple of projects we're working on in the northern residential TIF, so we may end up spending some money out of that fund. So looking forward to 2022, we give us a year-end balance of potentially around $60,000. My expected revenue for 2022 of around $100,000, which would give us a total fund of $160,000 available for 2022. Budgeting for the 2022 budget around $30,000 professional services, engineering, and then the rest would be in capital outlays, $120,000 for any projects project development within that northern residential tip. Gives us a total budget of $150,000. We did get a little bit more revenue in from the northern tip than what I originally estimated, and I think the reason for that, I did not account for any revenue coming off of the Redwood development. But some of that must have hit the payroll after, or the tax roll after we created the district. So I think there was some revenue that we're collecting off that Redwood development that I didn't initially anticipate. That was already under construction, but some of that got caught up in that tip. The good news is we are working on 2 different projects within that northern residential tip district. That would probably create somewhere around 160, 170 developable lots. So we've had a lot of progress in both tip districts. Is there any questions on the northern residential?
All right. Then I think we go to 471, the southern residential TIF next.
That's correct.
So also created in 2019, expected revenue this year of $35,000, which was closer to what I had initially estimated. This one pretty much right on par with what I had estimated. So for 2021, we did the same thing. We had $10,000 in professional services, $10,000 in capital outlay, a total budget of $20,000. Expect we'll have some leftover money for 2021, around $15,000. Expected revenue for 2022 of $60,000. Gives us the total funds on hand in 2022 of $75,000. Just split that out between professional services and capital outlays. $35,000 for professional services and $35,000 for infrastructure and capital outlays. Total budget for 2022 of $70,000. We are working on at least one project in the southern residential TIF district. The southern district, obviously, we knew was going to be a challenge. We're still working through that challenge. There is some land that we annexed in that we'd like to keep pushing for development. One of those properties is not the one we're looking at. It would have to be a new annexation. We'd have to expand the residential TIF, but it's certainly land available and prime for development, so we're working on that. We've entered into a contract with the Board of Works, approved the contract, the last Board of Works to start engineering on a lift station to service that development.
You know, I think this just points out, you know, the commitment the city's got to housing and how important it is, workforce housing. You know, the city's making those investments, and the TIF districts are helping, but, you know, you're looking at $35,000 of revenue generated. It's a start. It certainly is a benefit for, or some return on the amount that we're spending in those areas. And the cost to extend infrastructure is obviously significant. The cost to build a lift station, and we've got, I believe, 2 on the drawing board right now. That is our part in this whole thing. So again, economic development, community development, housing right now is number one. And these two funds are just certainly pointing out how critical it is that we continue on in these areas.
It's about making investments in the right places for a return on your investment. Much like the technology part, we had to put out a lot of money up front. We've already seen a 10 times return on our money. These southern and the northern residential tech are going to be the same fashion. That's the end goal. The projects that we're developing are not projects that are going to waste our money. An example would be the southern district. We're going to spend a lot of money up front, $1 million up front. But when you factor out the development capabilities of that investment, you're looking at 300 residential lots. You just did nothing but calculate the tap fee off those residential lots. You just about pay back that initial investment. And you factor in the taxes that they're going to generate, the potential employment of those people who are working here and paying taxes, buying goods. So the long-term investment of this will far
Questions on either of those TIF districts, Southern TIF districts? Say that 5 times, Len. Southern TIF district. Okay. I believe 472, the redevelopment allocation would be next.
This is our downtown, the original redevelopment was created in 1990. Current balance for the beginning of this year was 662,000, with expected revenue of around 330,000. Even the total funds on hand from 2021 of 992,000. Utility services of 5,000. We are paying utilities for the Canal Street property to the city, so that's why the fees are there. Professional services of 25,000, property acquisition of 5,000, placeholder, capital outlays 200,000, then our Buffalo Street bond payment of 157,950. Even the total for this year's budget of 392,950, and the balance of around 600,000. Expected revenue in 2022 of around 330,000 gives us a total of 929,000 for 2022 for the 2022 budget. I did not put any utility services in for next year, although I'm not going to rethink that since we're now paying utilities. About 50,000 for professional services. For next year, 5,000 for property acquisition, that's just a placeholder. And then $500,000 for capital outlays. This would be any project that we would develop downtown. Primarily right now would be earmarked for the Outlays project that we're working on. And then the bond payment for Buffalo Street of $168,500. This is the total budget of $723,500 for 2022.
So just a note, several years ago when the state decided that they were going to put an expiration date on these legacy TIF districts, they gave us a chance to bond, I think it was for 20 years, Jeremy, 25 years, and that coincided with the Buffalo Street project. So we were able to take advantage of that, and that was another, along with regional cities dollars that came in, I think $3.2 million came in regional cities. And the state allowed the TIF districts to expire if you had a current bond in 25 years. So that's why you'll see the bond expires in 2040, and we took advantage of that. Legacy TIF districts, when they were established by the state, did not have expiration dates, and they were designed to help downtowns. Downtowns couldn't generate the amount of money that, say, a tech park or an industrial park could generate an investment. And the legislature knew how important it was for downtowns to have TIF districts, and we've done a lot with this TIF district. You know, this building that we're in is a good example. Our facade grants, our Buffalo Street project, you know, these are really important dollars, but all good things must come to an end in about 19 years. So I did.
We've grown this district over the years, and it will continue to change a little bit. So there will be some difference in timing there as new areas are added on. We purposely haven't brought in the Owens property, the old Kroger's property, for a reason. We didn't want it to have a detrimental effect on our existing TIF district. So when we do that project, we'll write that in once we've cleared it and brought it back down to zero, so that it doesn't have a negative impact. Same thing, you know, at some point, the intent was to bring in the Marsh property, as we look to hopefully see that brought back to life at some point in time. So as we target these projects, we'll expand those districts to tackle those projects on an individual basis, and they'll have their own lifespan, so to speak. But yes, the initial district that was created when we did the Buffalo Street has that 2040 lifespan. The Buffalo Street project was $3.5 million from the state, $3.5 million that we put in the ground, which was the Buffalo Street project at the plaza, and then roughly, I think, $22.5 million from the developer. That was initially, I think, a $5 million mixed-use building. I think we're going to end up with closer to
probably gonna be closer to about 30 million from the developer. One of when we initially set up that original bond payment, that was based on the expiration of the Zimmer bond to pay for that new infrastructure. So when the Zimmer bond expired, we rolled into the new bond issue for Buffalo Street. I think it was about a year and a half lag between the two. So this does not account for any revenue that will be generated by the mixed-use building. Hopefully that mixed-use building will come in and allow us to continue to make improvements to the downtown.
Questions? All right. Next would be 474, Northern TIF.
So beginning of this year, we had roughly 4.6 million on hand, expected revenue for 2021 of around 2.9 million. Give us a total funds in 2021 of 7.5 million. 2021 budget, we had, so some of mine and the city engineer salaries come out of our TIF, so for 2021, we had roughly 65,000 in salaries. The sewage bond pledge, so this TIF district from its inception, all the way back to 2001, 2002, when they did the sewer treatment plant expansion, put the new plant out there. This district has always had that $600,000 bond pledge as part of its payment. Initially, in the early years, it was not generating that 600,000, not even anywhere close to it. But as it's grown, I would say probably for the last 10, 11, 12 years,
Ever since I
it's
can
made
remember.
at least $600,000 payment. White Island PBD bond, number one, 280,258. White Island PBD bond two, 111,600. And the third White Island PBD bond of 55,925. Thompson Thrift bonds, Warsaw Commons, Coles, retail development of 120,000. And then the airport industrial park bond of 357,000. I had engineering of 225,000, property acquisition of 5,000, place order, and then infrastructure project of 2021 of 1 million. Gave us a total budget for 2021 of 2.8 million, or a little over 2.8 million. And a year-end balance of 4.7 million. Expected revenue for 2022 of 2.9 million gives us a total funds on hand for 2022 of roughly 7.6 million. Salaries going up, obviously my salary is going to have a larger share paid out of Northern TIF in 2022 than what it has in the past. So those salaries, as well as adding an administrative position in there, those salaries have gone up. So total salaries for 2022 of 105,000. Sewage bond pledge still remains the same at 600,000. White Island PBD bond number one, 279,510. White Island PBD bond number two, 113,300. White Island PBD bond three, 54,925. Thompson Thrift bond of 120,863. The airport industrial park bond of 370,500. Professional services of 225,000. Property acquisition of 5,000, and then infrastructure project of 2 million. Gives a total budget of 3.8 million for 2022. The primary goal of the $2 million in infrastructure projects for 2022 will be 300 North. That's going to be the primary focus of those funds at this point in time. There may be something else that comes up, but that's my end goal. The engineering is underway, has been for about a year now. I'm hoping that engineering will be done by the end of this year, so that we can potentially bid that 300 North, which would be the third segment of 300 North out for 2022. I know the street department's really been pushing to get this done. It's the only gravel road we have in the city. It's in bad shape. It's got a couple of hills. We're gonna hopefully cut down some of those hills, improve sidelines. The intersection of 200 and 300 North, 200 West, and 300 North is terrible. I know the street department spent a lot of time trying to keep that up. So this is primary goal for 2022. We also may have potential for some pretty exciting news in the next few months, so that'll go along with this stuff. Looking forward to getting that underway next year.
Yeah, having access to 300, good access, is critical. And there's a couple lots that are undeveloped right now, and I know that's on prospects' minds. If they're going to make the investment, they can obviously enter on Polk Drive, but it would be very beneficial for any industrial site to have that access out the back onto 300. And the way it is now is not acceptable.
Google X, took me that way, and I wasn't thinking, and so I drove it Friday, so I can concur. Avoid it if Google tells you to go there.
There's a lot of people that travel that road.
Yeah.
There are. and,
Crazy.
It's only going to get more traffic, especially with our technology park development.
Right.
And I think there's some possibilities with that property directly north on the opposite side of the school, which is why we've been looking at doing the engineering work to address the issues on this section. If you remember correctly, we did section 1 between the school and the bridge. We're waiting on the county to do the bridge. The county did the bridge. We did section 1 that goes all the way back to 15 with the roundabout. So this would be kind of that third and final section at this point that will finish off. My understanding is the county is going to come behind us or even before us. I guess it depends on how quickly we move. And they're actually going to chip and seal the road further west. So ours will be paved, but they're going to chip and seal from 200 going west to address some of the issues at that intersection.
So will the tech park have some access out onto there then?
There will be some access, yeah.
That'll be good. That'd be nice for fire access too, if you ever need it.
Well, and right now, it's not great access.
No.
I believe Banner has access onto 300 North. Not the greatest access.
No.
I'm pretty sure Patrick Industry does too. Once again, it's not really utilized because it's just not great.
They used it for construction, I think. I don't think they use it for in and out. Jeremy, thanks for all your work. I know especially that TIF district is booming, and we're very happy that our investment from many years ago is paying off, not only in the TIF district, but the certified tech park. And we're keeping true, I think, to the use of that tech park was high quality, high tech jobs that require a very skilled workforce. And with an extremity coming in, I think it's a matter of time before they're potentially could look to the north. And there's some lots that are being looked at now that are available. So here we go. Questions? The only other thing I want to say about TIF districts is, people look at these funds and, none of this would have happened without the investment that we put. None of these funds were available when we set this up. These are all funds that we've generated for a finite period of time from the investments that we've made in creating that tech park, the infrastructure investments, the road, the fiber, the sewer. They're very expensive, as you all are very well aware. The sewer expansion was critical to support that and future expansions out there. And these funds have a limited, this TIF district has a limited life, and I think we've been very responsible with how we've used those funds to improve that whole area, transportation, infrastructure, the whole thing. So, any further comments before we move on, or questions? All right, Jeremy, I think we'll go on then to 475. This would be the Winona Interurban TIF.
Probably the biggest budget we've done all night.
Yeah, perhaps.
all
Hey,
year.
I hope it's changed. Speaking of TIF districts, when you don't create money, you don't have money, right? So that's kind of the Winona Interurban, despite valiant efforts over the last decade or so, we've yet to kind that catalyst project that really starts to drive this engine. The good news is, I think there's some good things on the horizon. We've got some, had some discussions underway for the Gaxley site. We've got the Arnold site under our control now. We're working with the state. May have mentioned that the last time we got a $500,000 grant that we're working with the state to clean up the Arnold property, that we worked with a developer out of Indy to create family housing, affordable housing units. We're working, hopefully working with Warsaw Chemical to continue to address their issues. And if you're not familiar, the marketplace at Warsaw has been in foreclosure for the last 2 years. And they've been actively auctioning that property off. That property has someone who has a winning bid at this point in time. We're talking to them about what the future of that property looks like as well. So a lot of activity in this area in the last few years. Hopefully, some things happen out there. But currently, there's around 60,000 on hand at the beginning of this year, with around $8,500 to receive in revenue. Gave us a total of about 69,000. We had budgeted this year for 5,000 in professional services and 45,000 in capital outlays, which gave us a total budget of 50,000, which would leave us roughly 19,000 on hand at the end of the year. Moving into 2022, we expect 8,500, which gives us the total funds for 2022 of 27,865. I've allocated or set aside 10,000 for professional services and 15,000 for capital outlays, which is a total budget of 25,000. Whether or not we spend any of this money that is budgeted for 2021 will be yet to be seen. Like I said, we are currently been talking about a couple of different projects that some of it may get spent yet this year. If it doesn't, it'll just be funds that are available for 2022. But I have to show them that funds are being spent because they are budgeted, which is why next year's budget will be reduced down to that $25,000. So not a lot in here, but got a lot of irons in the fire, so hopefully we can see something come to fruition out there.
Any final questions for Jeremy? You're obviously busy, and I appreciate all you're doing, and certainly presenting these budgets really kind of gives a blueprint for what's to come. But things always come up that we're never aware of, and we have to act and we have to have resources ready to act when we need to. So, again, any final comments or questions for Community and Economic Development? All right, thanks, Jeremy. All right, so, are there any other matters come before the council? All right, we will be meeting back at our regular time in September. We're looking at the Parks Building and potentially being ready to come to the council with BOT. We're still working through the final details of that. As you remember, you will all be involved in that final decision at ordinance level with certainly a first hearing and then a public hearing so that we can make that decision and get moving on that project. So, kind of things to come. Lynn, anything else from Budget Land?
We had our workshop with our DLGF rep today, and everything went pretty good. We're pretty well on track, so next thing's the public hearing on the second meeting in September. For the
Okay.
budget, yeah. And I don't know when Jennifer's planning on bringing the salary ordinances in.
I would encourage you all, we've now been through all the departments, you've seen every budget in this book. If you have issues or concerns or questions, please try and get those answered. And, I would seek out answers from those departments that are involved. Again, I think it's pretty much, we've seen what the wish lists are, and now as you've all been experienced enough to know, we look at our revenues and we see what tax rate, what tax levy will support these budgets, and we'll know. I don't think it's going to be a question if we're going to have to cut. We typically do. But I've always asked the departments to give me their wish list, and then when we need cuts, certainly ask them to prioritize their cuts. And that's how we'll continue to do that. Like I say, we just can't spend what we can't raise, and that's what it boils down to when it comes to finalizing this budget. So, all right, gentlemen, thank you again for your, yes. Yeah.
I won't be brief. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brandon Schmidt. I'm actually on the fire territory. I'm also a taxpayer in the Southern District, and I was a full-time firefighter for the city. I was a volunteer before I became a full-time firefighter. I left a few years ago to get into family business. But I just wanted to comment briefly on the fire department budget, specifically manpower. We had the incident that the mayor mentioned earlier a couple of weeks ago where we did have a rescued somebody from a burning house. During that incident, our first engine there only had one person available to go and do the rescue. Now, it is against policy of nearly every department in the country. As a matter of fact, there was a firefighter captain in Texas that was fired for doing what took place at the fire the other day. So, the only person available to go into that fire, there's people in the front yard saying there's kids up on that second floor. The first floor has a lot of fire, maybe fully involved. And they said there's kids up on that second floor. He was not willing to tell them that he was not going in that house until more people showed up. He took high risk to himself, to the family members who rely on him to come home, to go in and save those people. He wasn't willing to tell them he could go in. So he did go in. The second crew in actually were the ones who did rescue the gentleman. Did a fantastic job, and just can't say enough for these guys. So I'm here representing them. I'm here representing the territory, and I don't want to put him or any of those other guys or girls, ladies, in that position where they have to say, I can't go in and rescue your child. I have to wait until we have more people here. We're running short. B shift specifically is running short, has been for quite a while. We have another guy on B shift that's going to retire in here. We've got to get those guys there. So what it boils down to is we either need to tell those people in that front yard that we can't go in until more people show up, or we need to tell the family of the firefighter who went in and maybe risked too much that he went in because by himself, because that's what he felt like he had to do for that family. He risked it all. So we're gonna tell somebody in this situation, if it wouldn't have turned out like it did, we could have had to tell, he didn't tell them we're not going in right now. Or if it turns out bad, we tell his family, sorry, we didn't have anybody else to go in. And so I don't want to put them in that situation. It's a hard situation, and you all are in a hard situation too with this budget. And the mayor has mentioned multiple times, you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, right? He hasn't said those words, but I'm a businessman, I understand that. But I wanted to comment and just to tell you the importance of getting those extra firefighters, because we're short. We have been for a long time, and the guys will just keep doing what they do, right? They'll keep going above and beyond with the technical rescue, and dive, and compliance rates, and all of those things, and with the CARES program. They're willing to go above and beyond. So, yeah, it's just something for you all to consider as you consider this budget. But we'd really love to see you. Yeah, we can find a way to get this done. I think there's other things that can be cut out of that budget. And I'm willing to work with the chief on that, and whoever else would like to have any questions and work on that. I think we can get it done. I think it needs to be done. So needs and wants, for dreams, I think this is a need and not necessarily a want for a dream. So, love to answer any questions you might have on behalf of the territory, on behalf of the firefighters. Do you have any? I appreciate the time. It's a long day, a long meeting. I'm sure you're anxious to get home and dinner or whatever else you've got to do tonight. But thank you for the time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All right, thank you.
Hey, Brandon,